The value of education cannot be stressed enough for our young people. But education is more than what is taught in school. It's what you can teach at home or even at the gaming table. What if I told you that D&D and other tabletop RPGs are fantastic learning tools for your children?
Well, I think they are. And so let's talk about Dungeons & Dragons and other RPGs for your children this week on the Dungeon Masters Dojo.
Greetings and salutations, fellow DMs, GMs, referees, judges, game operation directors, and all other varieties of storyteller. I am Lou, and these are your Dungeon Masters.
I'm Scott.
And I'm Bill.
Welcome back to the dojo. D&D and other RPG games for children, aren't these games for adults?
No, I don't think so.
Well, it wasn't when I got started.
Not me either.
I mean, I was barely out of my infancy when D&D was first starting, so I mean, I was 7 years old when I started.
So
that was 10.
Is that a good age to start?
I think maybe a little bit later than that. 10, 12 is probably a solid number where you got to make sure they had the mental faculties. I was a little wild when I was a kid and desperately needed some direction. So for me, that's where gaming was put in my lap and gave me an outlet for my overactive imagination. So instead of acting out everywhere else, I acted out in the game. And so I was kind of maybe would be one of the exceptions, but I think 10 to 12 is a pretty good age where kids have a much better understanding of a lot of the morale points that you're going to be going over in Dungeons and Dragons.
I think it's a great age range to start at too. 10 to 12 is perfect in my opinion, but it's there's no such thing really as too late either.
Oh no, we have children in our group that started in their 30s.
Yeah, and they're doing just fine.
Yep.
I think Kenny is one of those.
I knew you were going to say that.
Well, because he is really. I think he's one of the latest newcomers.
He's our late bloomer.
Yep.
But Kenny's perfect example of it's never too late to start. And we could do a whole episode on the benefits of tabletop RPGs for older people, which we probably should do because now we're older people. But yeah, it's great getting these kids involved in this sort of thing. And if you're an educator or you work with children in any capacity, start a D&D club. Meet regularly.
One of our group, Marcus, is just that.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
He started at
he's in
his
school, and he started a D&D club at his school.
It's a great thing to do.
And he comes to our game and takes some of the stuff he sees with us and pares it down quite a bit, and then he reuses it with them.
Yep, he actually changes pretty much the rating. Pretty much,
Yeah.
We're kind of rated R. He brings it down to PG-13ish.
Yeah. And well, you look at our group, and there's 3 of them in our group that used to be Bill's Boy Scouts.
Oh, that's right. Yes, I forgot about that.
We'd go camping quite often, and while we were in the cabins and with decent weather, we'd break out the books and the dice, and we would have adventures right there by the fireside. And yeah, there's 3 of them that were my kids, and they came up and they're still playing today.
They're phenomenal players.
27 years later.
Yeah. They're very good.
I'm taking all the credit for that.
Well, you should.
Yeah.
You kind of molded them.
No, I probably shouldn't, but I'm going to because they're not here to defend themselves.
Well, true, but you molded them in the way that they should be playing the game the way it should be played.
I would hope I was an influence.
Yeah.
I would hope. I mean, they definitely have their different styles. Every single one of them, they have their different styles. We've gone over the type of game players, and we can pick each one of them very easily.
You know which one you are.
Yeah, you know which one you are, guys. But yeah, I will take a little bit of credit in getting them started, and I hope I've influenced them at least enough to keep playing. And I think that's one of the reasons they keep coming back, and they come here and game with us on a regular basis.
Yeah, and both Matt and Tom are very, very competent GMs in their own right.
Oh, that they are.
Mm-hmm.
Which is to your credit as well. You kind of graduate, I think. It's almost like going to graduate school when you get to sit at the head of the table, and you run a game and you do it well, and they both do it very, very well. Two totally different play styles, two totally different styles of running the game, and very different from one another and different from both Bill and I.
Right. But how do we present the game to these young kids? How do we start it off where we don't make it too intense for them?
Start small. I think in everything you do related to any of these games like this, start small.
Especially, educators. I mean, a lot of you have children, so you see what they are interested in, things like that. So bring some of their interest into the game, but just expand on it and let them use their imagination.
And that we don't see a lot of anymore either. Kids using their imagination.
No, they're
in their tablets or their phones or whatever.
The games
else.
do all the thinking for them these days. Where this, you have to do your own thinking, and it exercises the brain. It exercises their social skills. They have to deal with people. They have to do, whether it's the actual person sitting across from the table from them or the NPC. They have to develop social skills, which is very, very helpful as well.
Yeah, and it's something that requires interaction with other individuals personally. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of technology takes that interpersonal interaction out of the hands of folks today, and you lose something when you don't interact with people face to face. There's a way of communicating that's beyond words. There's tone and inflection. There's body language,
facial expressions.
Yeah, and you don't get that with a lot of these other avenues. So sitting across the table from someone and learning how to interact with them is really important for children, especially today when everything's digitized.
Well, whether it's digitized or not, in the virtual world, eventually you're going to have to stand face to face with somebody.
Yeah.
And dealing with the people and dealing with the issues that we present on the table for children, the problem solving, the monsters, how do we get around this? Imagination is part of it. Creativity and problem solving is another. How do you come up with the answer for the problems? And you work in cooperation with the people with you to come up with the answer. And that helps build your problem solving, your imagination, your creativity, and your social skills.
Teamwork.
Yeah.
Yep. It kind of trains them to start thinking as a team, or as not just me or my way, or it's the highway type thing.
I work in a supermarket. I don't know how many times I've seen kids throw full-blown tantrums, and I'm not talking young children. Children at this age, 10, 12, 13, throwing tantrums because they're not getting their box of Twinkies because they're acting out. Well, this is an avenue for them to act out and not be that bratty little kid, not be violent. I'm not going to go out in the backyard and I'm ticked off and I'm going to throw rocks at the neighbor's cat. This is an outlet for them, and a good outlet if it's done correctly.
Yeah, and I think a game like D&D, and this is going to sound weird saying it because of just the sort of things you do in the game, but I really think a game like D&D can help reduce violence.
Oh, yeah.
And you learn to solve problems with more effective means. I mean, granted, there's going to be the swords and the bows and the battles and stuff like that, but every encounter isn't about that.
Well, there's a difference between combat and violence.
That's what I was just about to say. Everything doesn't need to be shot or stabbed or slashed. They really have to think about what their target is.
Do you know who this is coming? Doesn't that sound weird coming out of?
I looked around for another mic. I thought maybe we had a guest visitor here. So,
no, it's me.
Wow, jeez.
But Lou's right. When he brings that up, it's not every problem is solved through violent means, and certainly in the real world, we have of course there's terrible instances where violence is perpetrated upon other people, but for the most part, in the workplace, you're not scuffling at the water cooler. You're learning how to work and get along with other individuals that may have different ideologies than you, different work ethics, that sort of thing. So it's really important, and I really think that games like this can help young people to develop that skill.
It sets a foundation.
Yeah.
It sets a foundation. It sets something to build upon.
Well, like you said in one of our other episodes, it was one of our 5 play styles, somebody's going to pick up that leadership role, and everybody's going to actually start following them eventually.
Yep.
And they're going to learn from that because, this is the right way to do it. I shouldn't do it this way.
Did he take a different medication before he got here or something?
Who are you?
I had a drink.
Mellowed him right out. Don't drink, children. It's bad for you.
This is why we have an explicit rating.
Yes.
Okay.
That's why.
We're talking to the game masters. We're not talking to the children themselves.
Yes.
Exactly.
Fortunately.
That's what I mean, too. I should have clarified myself. Sorry.
But, I mean, to that point, it does teach the kids to challenge established rules.
Yeah. Yeah. And I, you know what? There's, the key to that is to do so effectively, right? Challenging rules is fine as long as you do so constructively.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. And I do think that that's something that's exercised with Dungeons and Dragons and other tabletop RPGs. Right.
Well, when you're going through town, you can't just walk into the general store and grab stuff because you want it.
Yeah.
You have to purchase it.
Yep.
There are consequences when you do things wrong.
And that's another thing that I think this can teach is consequence.
Yeah. Consequences they're a natural result of your actions, be they good or otherwise, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a good example of that, and this comes right on the heels of doing our sci-fi campaign episode, is Star Trek did a very good job in the 60s of challenging established rules and did it in such a fashion that it was done gracefully. And I think a tabletop RPG in a fantasy or even a sci-fi setting can speak to social commentary much in the same way that Star Trek did back in the 60s.
I mean, with kids, you got to sugarcoat it a little bit.
Yeah.
You don't want to come out hardcore. But yeah, you very easily bring up some real world issues and see how they deal with it. And then through your NPCs, through the directive of the game master, show them what's right, show them what's wrong, show them, what's going to happen if you do the wrong thing and what's going to happen if you do the right thing.
Right, because even in this instance, the GM is just not the director or the storyteller. He's actually the influencer for these kids as well.
Very much so.
Yeah, you are that, positive, hopefully positive male or female role model that sadly is oftentimes absent in young people's lives today. And, even if they're not in a situation where there's the absence of a strong and positive male or female role model, you can be yet another one of those role models, one of those positive influences for children. And you can never have too many positive influences. You really can't.
And it's a good thing because sometimes these kids will look forward to, I'm going to go play a game with whoever today. And that whoever may not even know that they're that much of an influence. So they have to keep that in mind as well.
Yeah. Yeah, most definitely. I should always be at the forefront.
Well, I get a little hints of that every now and then. As I mentioned, I'm a scout leader, and I've been in scouting forever. Actually, even longer than I've been playing tabletop role-playing games. And I see a lot of now adults come up and, some of the best times I ever had was in scouting. And I try to keep that firm but fair persona when I'm a scoutmaster. I'll goof around a little bit, but, I am the authoritarian. It's my role. It is the dictatorship, and I am king. I have the last word on everything, and I try to make sure that they are instilled with decent values, and they do the right thing. And when we go into the woods, you leave it better than you found it. If you see trash, you pick it up. It's little things like that. Well, you take those little things and you roll it into your game, and you give them the same little instances here and there. And later in life, I found out that I have had an influence and a positive influence on an awful lot of kids. And that's a good feeling. That's why I'm still doing it. And the same thing with the game, in the gameplay. You get up at the head of the table, and like you mentioned earlier, 3 of my kids now play with us on a regular basis. They're all in their 30s.
40s
40, some of them, yeah. A couple of them in their 40s. And they still come back. And, that's a pretty good feeling for an ancient dinosaur like me.
I think when you start a game like this with young people that aren't yours, right? They're not your children. They're somebody else's. It's important to have some dialogue with their parents or guardians. This is, when your children come over on Friday to hang out with, my children This is a game that we play. This is what it's all about. Here's some resources you could do to look it up. And the content is always age appropriate.
Now, there's been a few times where I've actually had some younger kids come with their older brothers, and their mother or father want to know what was. All right, I know my older boy does this, but my younger boy, I'm not too sure. I said, well, why don't you just sit in the other room and listen? You don't even have to be in sight. You just have to sit there and listen from the other room. You can hear everything that's going on, and just you can evaluate that way. You're right there at the spot.
Yeah, an invitation to mom, dad, or guardian, whoever it may be,
absolutely.
is always a great idea.
And the key is have them sit around the corner, one room away or just on the other side of the room or behind the child where they can't be seen. So they're less of an influence to the child immediately, and you'll get a little bit more they won't have that, oh, gee, they're standing right behind me, they're watching me. Just say, oh, no, they're in the other room, you're good. And once they get involved in the game, they're going to forget that my parent guardian is sitting in the other room. They're just going to have a good old time. But that would give a good evaluation for the parent to say, all right, well, okay, that I see what you're doing. I like it. I don't like it for whatever reason. But yeah, an invitation's a pretty quick and easy way to kind of do away with any misgivings that the adult may have.
And quite a few times I've seen my son Emery. He has a couple friends where their parents were, wondering about Dungeons and Dragons, and they started playing with their kids, and their kids were between age 10 and 14 at the time, and the parents got involved. It kept everybody involved together. It kept them as a whole unit. They got to learn and teach together.
Well, another family game. Monopoly's not the only one.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good teaching tool, especially if you're playing with your parents. And there's some sort of lesson that they want to teach that, if you've ever had kids, you can tell when they tune out.
Yep.
Their eyes glaze over.
I get it all the time.
Yeah. Me too. There's been a lot of them that I've watched just totally tune me out, and that's a normal thing. But with these, you're gonna make a comment.
Say what you say.
Yeah. See, the bane of my existence for 30 years.
It's the child you never had.
But it's a lesson that can be taught.
It
can be taught in an entertaining fashion.
Yep. In a good fashion, it really makes everybody bond together that much quicker.
Yeah. And I think when we're talking about challenging established rules, establishments, and those sort of things, you really see, especially out of children, I think even a child that doesn't exercise their imagination, once they're given that opportunity, right? I think it's inherent in all children to just have an imagination that can really just go off the chains quick. They'll come up with some really creative workarounds, some really, really creative ways to challenge rules that are being exercised in a positive fashion. And that's pretty important.
That you just say to come up with some interesting things. They're going to bring stuff like further left than left field, because what's going through their head is not, you're thinking as an adult a little bit more logical, a little more linear, and they will come out with this thought from out of absolutely nowheres. And that's when you kind of look at the rule book going, yeah, that's not going to apply. You're going to make some adjustments on the fly.
Yeah.
A lot. And it softened things up. You can't, nope, the book says this, that you can't do that. You don't want to be that stringent. You want to be able to kind of flex a little bit. So, and with that said, how about we take a little bit of a break?
Hi, it's Lou. The good-looking one with a full head of lush hair? I'm taking a break from filling DM Scott's shampoo bottle with Nair to tell you about our new website, thedungeonmastersdojo.com. There, you'll find a host of awesome things, including a picture of me. Every third Friday of the month, a new blog post related to gaming comes out. Interested in getting caught up on the podcast episodes? You'll find those on the website too, as well as other interesting information. Head on over to thedungeonmastersdojo.com and pay us a visit. Send us a message too. We'd love to hear from you. Now, if you excuse me, I have to take the batteries out of DM Bill's hearing aid. See you next time in the dojo. And we're back. So, it's good. It's a good game, as we know, but it's a cooperative game that teaches teamwork as well.
Yeah, teamwork's important. especially for
that's just it. It's a cooperative game, and you have a adventuring party. You have a team for a reason. Everyone has strengths, everyone has weaknesses, and you need to, through everyone's strengths and weaknesses, recognize who does have those strengths, and if it's not yours, give someone else. You can't be the ball hog. It's like, no, I want to do everything. I want to do everything. They're going to learn that sometimes it's better to pass off the responsibility to someone else or ask someone else to do it. If you're the party leader, recognize the strengths and ask them to do it.
Not even that. I think even like when we talk about cooperation, it teaches them to share, things that they may find as well. That's huge in cooperation. You just don't hog everything for yourself.
The object is not to win at D&D.
Well, but in the beginning, they don't know that, so we have to teach them that.
You have to teach them that, yeah.
Yeah, and because there's really no winning at D&D, you always do better when you perform as a cohesive unit. Mm-hmm. Everybody ends up doing better when there's teamwork involved, especially in this game. And I think that's one of the key elements to this with the young people is, and Bill brought up Monopoly, right? The goal of Monopoly is to bankrupt everybody and you be the big winner. So there's going to be losers, mm-hmm. right? And that sucks.
Yeah, people get their feelings hurt.
Yeah, it's only fun for the winner. Right, but D&D is fun for everybody involved.
I don't know about you, but I don't think I've ever played Monopoly all the way to the end where anyone has won.
I have.
It seems to take forever.
It did. It's a lot of time investment, and if you don't win, it sucks.
Usually get bored and start chewing on the money.
But we'll go back to the whole cooperative thing. It teaches the kids how to, like I said, share. I got this. I'm going to share this with you because you can use it. I'm not going to hog it for myself.
Better than I, right?
Yeah.
That falls within your skill set. And if you have this, it works well for you. But it also works well for me because if you're the cleric and you have that healing item, I might need healing. Bill might need healing too. It's not going to do any good if I'm swinging it around, right? But if Lou the cleric is, then everybody benefits.
Yeah,
and everybody benefits from working as this team. And when I look at our table, the one thing that brings us here, of course, is our friendship and the game. But nobody is the same person. Matt's an athlete, right? Bill's a hunter. There's a bunch of different interests, right? I don't know what Lou does. It's techie. It's got computers and wires and a lot of zeros and ones.
He laughs at me every time I break out my flip phone.
Yeah, and so everybody comes from a different walk of life. We wouldn't have met Matt if Matt just was an athlete, right? Because none of us are participating in athletics. That's not like our thing, organized athletics. So it brings all sorts of different people with all sorts of different talents and interests together that may not have come together. Right, so it essentially is. It's like building a team, a very diverse team, and that's what the workplace is.
Oh, very much. The whole idea is to, when you're teaching this kid this game, and our point is this is all transferable to real everyday life. These are life lessons that we hopefully will take with them later on and apply. And I learned this. I learned how to be a leader. I learned how to be a follower. I learned to accept my wins and my defeats. I won't do that again. I'm going to figure out what I did wrong and not do that again. And they will get injured. Well, the players, not the players, the characters will get injured. I guess jumping through a window was a bad idea. It looks good on the movies, but the game master just gave me 2 points of damage from the broken glass. So I guess if I did that in real life, I bet you that would hurt in real life too.
Oh yeah, but let's talk about real life. This has a lot of practical things. It teaches them math. They're writing down notes all the time, so they're learning how to note take properly. They're learning how to just use writing skills in general.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we are real big on pushing backgrounds. Give us an extensive background. And when we say extensive, our guys will throw 10, 12, 14 pages.
Too many.
Us. I know I'm guilty of that as well. But as you're writing, it needs to be legible.
Yep.
So grammar, spelling, punctuation, all comes into play. It teaches you to do it correctly. And I've read other people's things and handed it back to them going, I can't make heads or tail of this. Do you know what punctuation is?
Yeah, and then even, like I said, math, when they're trying to figure out how far their fireball could go, they have to, they have their map out and they got to count each square, 5, 10, 15, 20.
Yep.
They're going to learn that. They're going to learn the circumferences, little geometry involved in there as well.
Well, there's also cones of effect where it starts off at 50 feet and it goes out 60 feet with 30 feet at its apex. So they're like, what? Okay, so now we're thinking on, they said a geometry. We're thinking in 3 dimensions.
Yeah.
Things
Encumbrance.
Things fly. Encumbrance. How much weight can I carry? How strong am I? So, all right, total up. The book tells you how much everything weighs. Total all up. How much are you carrying? 216 pounds, and your strength says you can carry 90. Well, I guess you're setting a bunch of stuff aside, aren't you?
What are you getting rid of?
Yep. And they're going to have to learn to do that. And like I said, math comes into play, a variety of calculations, your spell effects, especially when you get into your spell casting, there's a lot of math involved in that. For an older individual, a lot of it's off the top of your head. For the kids at 10, 12, when they're still learning, their area of effects and their fractions and transferring anything into 3D, line of sight. Line of sight's a simple thing, you would think, for an archer. Try to explain that in-game mechanics to a child of 10 years old going, no, you can't fire your bow. Why? There's a tree in the way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think math is a dry subject. I hated math. I know people that loved math.
That's me.
I hated math. I was terrible at math. I had zero interest in math. It was awful. I was a kid drawing a sturdy dwarven warrior in the margin of my math notebook because that was way cooler than learning how to do math. But one of the things that D&D helped me with, and I started with AD&D, and AD&D was math heavy.
That was Everything was math.
Speed, everything. Weapon speeds. But my math grades improved so much so that my math teachers thought that I had a tutor.
You did.
D&D.
Yep.
And
Gary Gygax.
Thank you, Gary.
Yes, thank you.
God rest his soul. So it makes certain aspects of learning very, very fun, especially when they may not be engaging for these children. But when you put it in the context of a game.
Well, here's a bunch of math, and at the end there's a fireball involved.
Yeah.
Math suddenly looks really cool.
Or budgeting. Before 5th edition gave you, chainmail armor or studded leather armor and like this equipment package for your character. Yeah, you rolled.
You started with starting gold.
Yep.
And then you had to go out and buy what you needed.
And you had the budget.
Yep.
And that was hard. Because
that was always some sacrifice in there.
Yeah, there was and that's what budget is about. It's like, I really want that chainmail, but if I get that chainmail, then I can't afford this longsword or this bastard sword or this
or to eat.
Yes. which is important as well. I don't know how many times I was all ready to go and I'm like, oh, geez, I got no food. And it's hard to catch a rabbit with a sword. It's damn near impossible.
You went hungry many a night.
I went hungry many an adventuring night.
What are you eating tonight?
Grass
And tree bark again.
Bootlaces. So there's a lot of practical education involved in the game that's important for children to have.
All right, let's talk. Let's switch the subject a little bit. Let's talk about. Let's go with feelings, expression, moods.
This is my favorite part, and I think that role play is really, really cathartic. Mm-hmm. For adults. It's used in therapy for adults. Children know how they feel. They just have a hard time expressing it. So, they constructively. Their feelings come out in behaviors. So role play affords them the opportunity to kind of express that in a positive fashion. I'm not expressing it because it's me. I'm expressing it because this is my character. This is my wizard. This is my warrior or ranger or whatever have you. And it grants them that opportunity to kind of express their feelings on certain topics, which I think could be very, very healthy for them.
Agreed. I know, like I said, when I started, I had an overactive imagination and was prone to act out in some very interesting ways. There was one point where I was taking suction cup action figures and dumping them in a bucket of water and hucking them off a bridge onto oncoming cars. Not exactly proud of that today. Back then it was wicked cool. But it's things like that, were on the brink of getting me into some very serious trouble. And some adults recognized this and said, no, we have an outlet for you. And one of my best friends, his younger brother, and a couple of others got together, and the older brother says, here, try this, and presented the game to us when it first came out. And that's exactly it. Now you can act out in a different fashion. It's like, okay, I was frustrated with X, got into an argument with my little brother again, right? Well, I'm not taking it out on my little brother. I'm going to take it out on that goblin. Well,
and at the same time, again, you learn consequence in the game as well.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There's always something else. But, it gave you, like to Scott's point, it's therapeutic.
Mm-hmm.
It's therapeutic. And a lot of times you can analyze the kids, and if they come every Wednesday evening for an hour and a half, 2 hours to game, and every evening the same kid is going through patterns of, how he's acting, you could recognize those patterns, and you might want to address other, pull aside, talk to the parents saying, I don't know why, but every single time he sees this, it becomes an issue. He either, doesn't want to play anymore, or he acts out, and no matter what the circumstances is, I'm going to hack it. I'm going to hit it with a sword. I'm going to hit it with a chair. I'm going to hit it with another player. There's something triggering there, and, you might want to talk to the parents about it. And as an adult, you would notice these things where the kids aren't. So you might want to keep an eye on it, because, like I said, they show their feelings on their sleeves. They just come spilling out. Now, it may not be articulated correctly or in an exact fashion, but the basic anger or shyness or confusion is going to be there. And you'll sometimes see some patterns, and it's something that you could help address. And it might be something minor. Hopefully it's something minor.
Yeah. Even though, when you bring up shyness, and when I started playing D&D, I was a relatively shy kid, and a lot of the other kids that I played with were shy as well. They didn't say a lot. They were the quiet kids, and through the game, they kind of came out of their shell, and they learned how to express themselves, and that was really good for them. It was really really good for me as a young kid to be able to do that. And back when I started, it was kind of like that was the game that was the for the nerdy kids or the geeky kids, So that's what we were. That's how we were labeled. We're the geeky kids that like playing the game that's got a lot of math, or it's got dragons in it and all sorts of silliness. But that was a good outlet for us.
Mm-hmm. Well, and when we started gaming, there wasn't nearly as many distractions available. Now there's countless video games, and just the fact that they have a miniaturized, high-powered computer in their pocket called a phone. We didn't have that. We had books. We had 4 channels on TV. If you're really lucky and you had the area antenna with a little rotary antenna, you might be able to pick up one more channel from the next state over on a good day. So you had 5 channels. Yay!
Yeah, and back then your remote control was the kid.
The kid.
Get up there and
change turn it to channel 3. Yeah, exactly. So these days there's so many other different distractions that are mindless. TV's mindless. A lot of these role-playing games, or the video games, they'll say, oh, no, you got to learn this and you got to learn that. Yeah, okay, I can see in a technological world where a lot of these games, eye-hand coordination, I guess, maybe.
Well, I think you're learning more patterns in those electronic, the video games, where in this, there's no pattern to anything.
Oh, no.
You have to be mind wide open.
It is very, very random. That's why, the dice are random. You're not entirely sure what the outcome is going to be. That's why you're rolling the dice.
It's very empowering too, to a child who can be otherwise disempowered. You know, think back to your childhood. There was you didn't have a lot of control over much. You know, you had those expectations your parents laid out. You know, you went to school. You had no choice in that. You came home after school. You had no choice in that. You did your homework. You know, you ate your vegetables.
Did your chores.
And D&D was a very empowering thing because everything was your choice.
Yeah, you had control.
Yeah.
You had at least control of what you were going to do.
Yeah.
Or tried to do. If you can think of it, you can try it. I'm going to jump on the table and dance. Why? Because I want to jump on the table and dance. Okay, jump on the table and dance. Roll decks, make sure you don't fall off.
Yeah, and that sort of empowerment is very healthy for kids because that's going to be something that they're going to need to learn and control, is that free will of theirs when they hit the adult world or even just the teenage world.
Teenage world is tumultuous enough.
Yeah.
When the hormones are raging and all of a sudden there's this entire other group of people that have different body parts than you.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you start noticing those, and that becomes your world.
Yep. You start becoming interested in companionship.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big part of this too.
Yeah. Is that companionship, forging relationships?
We have friends.
Yeah.
Alliances. You know, every little bit of everything.
Yeah. 30 some odd years playing D&D with the same people because we sat at the gaming table once. We're like, geez, I like this game. I like these people here. And, you know, I had a hair lost later and we're still here.
Well, some of us still have hair.
Some of us still have hair. Some of us haven't been running the table with you on it. That's why.
Let's see. I game mastered for Lou and I have no hair. And Scott game mastered for Lou and
None.
He has no hair. And Lou has this wonderful Captain Fantastic gray streak thing going in his hair. So, because he still has hair.
He's like a discount Mr. Fantastic.
That's it. That's it. It's the Walmart version.
Reed Richards.
All right. So we've mentioned this a couple times earlier. Consequences for your choices.
That brings up, that's a whole thing that little kids need to learn. There's consequences for whatever you do, good or bad.
Absolutely. And in today's culture where nothing's ever their fault. It's always someone else's fault these days. It seems that way. There's consequences to your choices. Yes, that orc jumped out and you slew the orc. Great. But what about the other one that's seen it happen and runs back and tells all the other orcs?
The rest of the tribe is angry, and now you have that to contend with.
Mm-hmm.
That's nothing that you really don't want to contend with, so you shouldn't do it.
You're playing the rogue. You go into town, well, I'm going to steal this, and I'm going to steal that, and I'm going to pick up that, and I'm going to pick up that. What if you get caught?
Oh, and you will get caught.
You will get caught. You will get caught. Okay, now you're going to be put in jail. All things you took are going to be taken away from you, along with the stuff that you didn't take. The stuff that was yours is no longer yours. Yep. You're in jail. You will now have to pay a fine with money you don't have anymore. Or
because you bought that long sword.
Because you bought the long sword.
Well, and it's true. You overspend sometimes. You go hungry.
Yeah, it's ramen noodles,
and that's if you can afford that.
Right. I think the other thing too that is great about this is there's consequences for your choices, but this is just practice, right? So you're not learning the hard way at 18 when you go off. And you're living away at college, you're already practiced at it because at the end of the night, it's not going to follow you home. It may still be waiting there for you at the gaming table, a week from there now, but it's not something that travels with you for a while.
If you're lucky, leave a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
Oh, you were caught. They're threatening to cut your finger off or pay 100 gold pieces. Now they just took everything you own. You have no money. You have a group you're traveling with. Are they going to come up with 100 gold pieces? And now you got to pay them back. I mean, you don't have to be really drastic. You don't have to be graphic. Remember, these are kids.
Yeah.
Now, granted, they've seen worse in some of the video games, but let's try not to emulate the video games. But then leave it there.
There's lessons to be learned.
Let them mull it over for the whole week.
Yeah, and they could come back with a creative response to you. I don't have money, and the whole party doesn't have that kind of money, but maybe I can, perform a service for you.
Community service.
Yeah. Well, we have this band of orcs that's been raiding farms and the whatnot. So maybe if you go out there and you take care of that band of orcs, then we can call it all squared away, and we'll even give you your stuff back. Not the stuff you took, but the stuff necessary for the completion of that community service.
And yeah, you said it well there. Just they have to learn from their consequences. They just can't, like you said, go out and do things without thinking there's going to be no repercussions.
Yeah, it's practice in the decision-making process, and I think everybody needs that because it seems awfully unfair to thrust a child upon the world. And when I say child, I mean even as old as 20 with very limited experience in decision-making.
Well, if you're at home and mom and dad takes care of the finances, they take care of the food, they pay for the cable, they pay for your phone, you get 16, you get a part-time job. Well, all you got to do is put a little bit of money in the bank, and they give you a little bit more money, and now you have a car, and you're on their insurance. And then you hit 21, and it's like, okay, you go to college, and all that goes away. We're going to pay for your college fund, but we can't pay for anything else. You need to get a job. It's like, well, I have to buy my own food. I have to cook my own food.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, reality can be really harsh.
Yep, that's the real world.
It's the real world. It can be really harsh. And not saying that we're going to learn how to cook gourmet meals by playing D&D, but you're going to learn to budget your money so you can have food to eat while playing D&D. You're going to be able to realize that you need to be able to have somewhere to live. You're not going to just throw a tarp up with your horse, if you're lucky to have one, out in the woods, because the farmer may not want you on his property.
That's right. So what about modifying, because this is an adult game, what about modifying it down for children?
There is something that Wizards of the Coast did that was really, really cool. And they have these things called Young Adventurers Guides. And I bought a couple of them for a young guy that was asking me about D&D, and they're all over Amazon. They're like between $5 and $8, so they're really, really affordable. They're a rule set. They're nice hardcover books. They got some nice artwork on them, and they're up to I think like 5 of them now. You got warriors and weapons, monsters and creatures, dungeons and tombs, wizards and spells, beasts and behemoths. So it's a Dungeons and Dragons rule set that's perfect and was designed for children. So that's a good place to start. In my opinion, is with those books.
I wish I had something like that when I was younger.
Yeah, because we were muddling through those books written by Gary Gygax, those AD&D books, and I got the impression that they weren't meant for the 10-year-old me that was reading them, because they were complicated.
Yes, they were,
and they're still kind of complicated when you go back and you're looking at them now, especially after playing 5th edition for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah,
they seem really like cumbersome,
very heavy.
Yeah, so my suggestion, go with those, to start.
As far as modifying, I mean, describe your monsters, but you don't want to give these kids nightmares. They are kids.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's keep the graphics on the down low. Describe your monsters, round off the corners. The fangs don't have to be all that long. I mean, you don't have to give flesh-rending descriptions of these. You don't want to terrify the kids.
Tone it down a little bit.
And when it comes to actual combat, give them air to the side of the players. Give them the grace. And all right, they're missing. All right. Oh, gee, so's my guy. Gee, all right. Oh, yeah, you got him. Fudge the numbers if you have to. Give them the victories. Give them that sense of accomplishment, because that's what they're learning to cooperate. They're learning to share. They're learning their budgeting. They're learning an awful lot of stuff. Positive reinforcement's a great way to make sure it sticks.
Yeah.
Let them accomplish the feat. Let them beat the monsters. Even if you do hold over to the next week with a cliffhanger or something like that, let them accomplish it. And if you have to kind of like, all right, I'll let this one slide, let it slide. Give them the victory, because That's what's going to keep them coming back, number one, and reinforce all these little lessons that you've been subliminally pounding into them over the course of the 2 hours every week for the last several months you've been gaming with them.
Yeah, looking at the content is important too. The content of your adventure, it's going to be different.
Yes.
You know, the storyline and everything, it's going to be different than what you would deliver to a group of 30-year-olds, or, you know, a campaign or an adventure I would run for 10-year-old children is going to be very different than what I would run.
Yeah, they're not out there trying to save the world. Maybe the town.
Yeah.
But you don't need these giant, sweeping, epic stories for 10 and 12-year-olds. You're going to lose them real fast.
Yep, that's why it's called baby steps. A little bit at a time.
Yeah, you introduce them in little bits and pieces, and yeah, the content. Sometimes, you know, the battle we could get pretty descriptive with at the gaming table. For them, it might just be a little brushed over. You know, you don't want to present them with The Walking Dead. You want a little more Disney.
Yes.
Than that, and make it so that it's, you know, it's appropriate for that age range. Something, you know, a little less violent. You know, you look at cartoons that are geared towards children. You know, remember the old G.I. Joe cartoon?
Yeah.
Every time a plane was shot down, you always saw a parachute.
Yes. Yep. Boom. Everyone jumped out.
Yep. More parachutes and less fiery crashes, and it'll be a lot more appropriate content for the children at your gaming table, especially if they're like 10 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to agree with you on that. And with that, Scott, I'd like to thank you and Bill. And that's why you should introduce your children to Dungeons & Dragons at an early age. That's going to conclude this episode. Thanks for tuning in and listening. Please subscribe to the podcast for more great content. If you'd like to hear a particular topic, you can reach us on Facebook at the Dungeon Masters Dojo. Or you can drop us an email at thedungeonmastersdojo@gmail.com. Thank you, and have a good day.